Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever in the world you are joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar. It's Publish with Wiley, Scientific Writing Tips for Non-Native English Speakers. It's very exciting because we have a really, truly global audience here today. I was looking at the registrations and it's exciting to see people from all over. We have Algeria, I see Egypt, Ethiopia, there's Germany and Greece. I also see Iran, Morocco, Nigeria, Pakistan. I see South Africa and Turkey, and there are many others. So really exciting to see so many people from around the world. Thank you for joining us. Today, our speaker is in Canada, and I am here in New Jersey on the East Coast of the United States. It's very hot. It's going to be 91 degrees, or that looks like 32 Celsius, I believe. So we are starting our summer heat wave now. So thanks for joining us today. My name is Amy. I'm a member of the Wiley training team. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and you will receive an email with a link to the recording in 24 hours. If you're attending live today with us, you will also get a certificate of participation. So look out for that email in about 24 hours after the session. Also, the presentation being used today is in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar panel. So you can go to that part of the GoToWebinar panel under handouts and download the document and keep it as a reference. Also, please notice the questions section in the GoToWebinar panel. We encourage you to use the questions panel and ask your questions throughout the session, and we'll monitor them and address them at the end of the presentation. Now, finally, I would like to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Radhika is a publisher at Wiley and manages the growth and development of a portfolio of 25 journals in health sciences. She has 7 years of experience in the publication industry. In her previous role as a deputy editor in oncology journals at Wiley, she evaluated the scientific, ethical, and technical aspects of manuscript, managed various aspects of the peer review process, and helped to publish coherent and scientifically sound content. So I know we're all excited to hear from her today, so I'm going to hand this over to you, Radhika. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for joining this webinar today. I'm really excited to be here with you and speak to you about the topic of scientific writing tips, sharing a few tips, basically on a few syntax and kind of language errors, etc. So many of you might be in the midst of writing a research manuscript, and then you may have many questions like, does my sentence read well? Is this paragraph constructed well? Does my writing actually convey what exactly I want to say? So there are many things that go on in a researcher's mind while writing a thesis or a manuscript. So through this webinar, I hope to answer such questions. And while it is challenging to go through the entire gamut of English grammar, I've tried to put together a few concepts such as sentence construction and word choice, which will largely kind of, to a large extent, will determine how the overall manuscript will read like. So without further ado, I'll just jump to the slides here. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah. Always remember that an excellent writing can never mask a poorly conducted research, but an excellent research might not get the recognition it deserves if it is poorly presented. So what editors are looking for in a manuscript is grammar, readability, style, and vocabulary. So the way you write a manuscript should have a core story to it. And your story should be your guide. If you lack the understanding of the topic behind your understanding of the topic behind whatever you're writing, that will lead to poor presentation. And all the paragraphs will start looking like, you know, a pile of random findings by other researchers. So today I'll be discussing about a few types of language errors. The first one, before we start the first one, I'd like to have a poll. So, which is why we conclude that the EV fingerprint test reduced unnecessary prostate biopsies. So I just want to know from you if this sentence reads fine.
Okay, so we're posting a poll. So just choose if that looks fine to you or if you think it does not make sense. This is an anonymous poll just to get some feedback on where you are at the moment in evaluating these kind of sentences. So thank you for your votes. I see it all coming in now. Just give it one more moment for everyone to have a chance, and then we'll share the results. So either yes, it looks fine, or no, it doesn't make sense. Okay. And still have votes coming in quickly. Let's give it just a second. And we are going to close the poll and we will share the results here. Radhika, can you see them?
I'm not sure I'm able to see this. Can you just please read it out for me if it's not?
Absolutely. So we have about a 70-30 split here. 71% says this does not make sense, and 29% says, yes, it looks fine.
All right. So for the people who said, no, it does not make sense, they're absolutely correct. So the first type of error that we see is sentence fragment. So a sentence fragment is an incomplete sentence that is punctuated like a complete sentence. So sentence fragments cannot stand on their own. And a sentence is incomplete because it doesn't make sense by itself. This is called as a sentence fragment. Sentence fragments can occur because of missing subjects or verbs, afterthoughts, abandoned clause, words meant only to support or describe another idea, or typographical errors or omission of words. So in order to avoid sentence fragments, ensure that your sentence is complete and makes sense on its own. So an example of a sentence fragment that does not have a subject is use 10% lignocaine spray via oral cavity. So this begs the question, who used it? So you provide the missing subject, such as the anesthetist used 10% of the spray. The next type of example is when a fragment does not have a verb. So in this sentence, if it says the patient suffering from weakness and shortness of breath, so what happened to the patient is the next question. So you add the missing verb. Say that the patient is or was suffering from weakness, or the patient suffering from weakness was admitted to the hospital. The next type of example is a fragment that was added as an afterthought. So there are several risk factors for diabetes, and there's a period there. For example, family history, ethnicity, etc. So this for example, what is it qualifying? What is the example doing anything? So you use a comma to complete the sentence. There are several risk factors for diabetes. For example, family history, ethnicity, etc. So you know that the family history, ethnicity, etc. is actually the describing the risk factors for diabetes. The next type of example is an abandoned clause. So an example for this would be when we discontinued a drug. So what happened? What happened when you discontinue the drug or the treatment? So use a comma to complete the sentence. So when we discontinued the drug, the patient stopped experiencing adverse effects. The next example is words meant to support or describe another sentence. So when you see these two sentences, medication was stopped if the symptoms had subsided. So these two support each other, but then they're separated by a period. So you connect the two sentences without the period, or you add a fragment as an introductory phrase and connect the two sentences with a comma. So medication was stopped if the symptoms had subsided, or if the symptoms had subsided, medication was stopped. So before we go on to the next type of error, let's have a poll. The patient fell on the street. He had a medical history of hematoma and vascular dementia. So does this read well?
Okay, here's your poll. Just going to choose again. Yes, this looks fine, or no, something seems amiss in this sentence. So the poll answers are coming in. Again, this is anonymous, just for use during this session. Okay, I can see more than half of you have voted. Let me give you one more minute. Just a moment there. Okay, so let's go ahead and close the poll, and we will see the results here. So the patient fell on the street. He had a medical history of hematoma and vascular dementia. Is this sentence okay? So 64% said no, and 36% said yes.
So this is not a correct sentence. So that brings us to the next type of error, the punctuation. So what you saw in the previous sentence is called a comma splice. So if you look at the example given, you'll see that there are two parts of two parts of either side of the comma are complete sentences, and the comma incorrectly joins these two sentences. So a comma splice occurs when two complete sentences or independent clauses are joined with a comma. So the way to correct this is don't join two complete sentences using a comma. Let us see a few examples. So the way to correct the comma splice is by using a period, a semicolon, or using a comma and one of the fanboys conjunction. So you can look for comma splices by examining the commas in sentences you see. So if you compare the two parted separates, if these parts can serve as complete sentences, the sentence has a comma splice. So for example, we recruited 500 patients and conducted a blood test, comma, the results were still unreliable. So the results were still unreliable, and the other part, we recruited 500 patients. These are two complete sentences. So you can either add a period and say, we recruited 500 patients and conducted the blood test. You can put a period there and then start another sentence with, the results were still unreliable. Or you can use semicolon and comma and fanboys, fanboys conjunction. So before we go to the next type of error, let's have another poll. About 85% of lung cancers are NSCLC, while one of the subtypes is adenocarcinoma. Is this fine or not?
Take a look at the poll again. Either this looks fine or something is amiss. Please cast your vote. Okay, we're going to close that and share the results here. And in this case, 92% responded that something is amiss, and 8% said it is fine.
So the next type of error that we see are run-on or fused sentences. So for run-on or fused sentences occur when two complete sentences are joined together with no connecting words or punctuation. So as in the example, we see that about 85% of lung cancers are NSCLC, and one of the subtypes is adenocarcinoma. So these are, you need to check that your sentence is complete and makes sense on its own. So you can check, you can correct the run-on sentences or few sentences the same way that you would correct the comma splice, as in you can use a period, you can use semicolon, or you can use comma and one of the fanboys. So before we go to the next type of error, we'll have another poll. The patient was referred to a specialist with stomach pain. Is this fine or not?
Okay. The poll is open. I really appreciate you taking the time to give us some feedback here and vote in the poll before we move on. Okay, a good number of people have voted, so let's close this and we will share the results. This one is much closer. 59% said no, it doesn't make sense, and 41% says yes, it looks fine.
All right. So this type, this is an incorrect sentence, of course, and the type of error that we are dealing with here is called as the modifier. So a modifier is a word or a phrase or a clause that adds meaning or changes or clarifies or describes another word or phrase or clause. So there are sometimes writers use these modifiers incorrectly, and then it leads to strange and sometimes funny sentences. So there are two types of modifier errors. One is called as the misplaced modifiers, and the other one is called as the dangling modifiers. So a misplaced modifier is a modifier that is placed very far away from the word that it actually describes. Whereas when there is nothing that the word, phrase, or clause can modify, the modifier is said to dangle. So the way to correct this error is place the modifier next to the word or phrase that it describes. So in the previous example, the patient was referred to the physician with stomach pain. So this means that did the physician have a stomach pain? No, what we need to say was that the patient was suffering from stomach pain and he or she was referred to the physician. So the correct way of saying is the patient with stomach pain was referred to the physician. Before we go on to the next type of error, let's have another poll. This is a notice in the park which says no loitering, don't smoke, jumping not allowed on the benches, and parking not permitted. So does this notice in the park read correctly or not?
Does that notice read well or not? Yes, it looks fine, or no, it doesn't make sense. Okay, the votes are coming in. We'll just give it another moment or two. Again, this is anonymous. Okay, we're going to close that and share the results. So 72% said it does not make sense, and 28% says yes, it looks fine.
So we are dealing with faulty parallelism here. So faulty parallelism occurs when a list or sentence does not use the same type of words to describe similar ideas. So in lists or sentences, it is good to use the same types of words to describe similar ideas, such as in the first example, where the list of words don't match. For example, the patients were asked to lie down, close their eyes, and then inhaling the anesthetic. So here the inhaling needs to be corrected and then, made it to match the previous words, such as lie down and close their eyes. So it should read as patients were asked to lie down, close their eyes, and inhale the anesthetics. So faulty parallelism can occur also because of conjunctions that do not correlate, or uncoordinated or mismatched conjunctions, the examples of which are given here. So we move on, and then we'll have another poll. First, we searched PubMed database, then one author selects the studies for review. How does that sound?
Okay, your poll is open. Getting a lot of responses. I appreciate that for us here. So yes, it looks fine, or no, it doesn't make sense. Okay, we're going to close that and we're going to share the results here. About 80-20, 82% no, and 18% yes, it's fine.
So this error that we saw in the example is called as the sentence shift. And sentence shifts occurs due to the changes in tense, number, or person. And a shift can happen when a sentence begins in one way and ends in another. So wherever possible, make sure that the sentence begin and end in the same manner. And as an example of shift in tense, if you look at the first example, there are two highlighted words, the examined and reviews, both of which are in different tenses. So you make them as the same tense as the past tense. Prior to chemotherapy, the oncologist examined the patient and reviewed the treatment history. So similarly, there are examples for shift in number and shift in person. Next, we go to the to another type of error. So before we do that, we'll have a poll and ask this question: psycho-oncologists are among the most sought after specializations.
Okay, does that look fine or does not make sense? In the poll, you can vote for one of those choices. I just want to remind you that you can download this handout in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel so that you will have all of these practical tips and help. Okay, we're going to close that and check the results here. We had 70-30, 70% no, that doesn't make sense, and 30% yes, it looks fine.
So the 70% who said no are correct. So we are dealing with faulty comparison. This is an error that occurs when two things are incorrectly compared. So whenever you want to draw a comparison, check if the things that you are comparing are of the same type. So for example, diagnosis of dementia is easier than schizophrenia. So here you're comparing two incomparable things. So you revise that and say diagnosis of dementia is easier than that of schizophrenia. And another example would diagnosis of viral infections is more difficult, which then asks a question, then what? More difficult than what? So you say diagnosis of viral infection is more difficult than treating the disease, so on and so forth. So these are the different types of errors that we have seen: sentence fragments, comma splice, few sentences, faulty modification, faulty parallelism, sentence shift, faulty comparison, etc. So we come to the other type of errors such as wordiness, redundancy, and sentence length. So wordiness is use of too many unnecessary words. So for example, a number of can be replaced by many. A majority of can be replaced by most. Are of the same opinion can be replaced by agree. So this not only reduces your word count, but it also makes your sentence look crisp. Redundancy is unnecessary repetition of words to convey the same idea. For example, red in color. Red is already a color, so you don't have to say red in color. And 8 p.m. in the night. PM denotes that it is night, so you don't have to say 8 p.m. in the night. And coming to sentence length, simplify the sentences and break it into parts wherever necessary. So sentences should be long enough to be considered academic, but short enough to present the concepts clearly. So a typical average is about 17 to 22 words of length, which would give you a nice looking sentence. So you can use compound sentences to complete your ideas and make your concepts clear to the reader. Now we come to other types of tips, which are more general and which we routinely see in manuscripts. The first one is to place the subject and the verb as close together as possible in a sentence. So you minimize the subject and verb separation in the sense you should not have too many intervening words in between your subject and the verb. As an example, several variables to measure the effect of the therapy, some more effective and precise than others, were used. So the subject in the first part of the sentence and the verb in the last part of the sentence are separated by a lot of words. So this can be revised and said in a more in a better way, such as several variables were used to measure the effect of therapy, some more effective and precise than the others. The second tip that I would give is place the subject in the topic position to highlight the focus of the topic discussed, which means the placement of the topic sentence is important. So a topic sentence essentially tells the readers about the rest of the paragraph. So when you start a paragraph, you start with a topic sentence as an introductory portion, and all the sentences after it needs to give more information about the sentence to prove by offering facts about it or to describe it in more detail. So that the reader understands where you are where you are taking this discussion to and how you are treating your topic. So every paragraph should include a topic sentence that identifies your main idea of the paragraph, and then the topic sentence also states the subject the writer wishes to describe in the following sentences. The next step would be to mention old information first, followed by new information, that is old to new sequencing. In the sense, as an example, pancreatic, in this example, if you see, pancreatic cancer is associated with poor prognosis. This is already a known fact. Now, what is unknown is that based on recent preclinical findings, we have these mRNA and miRNA expression that change during the early stages of the cancer. So this is the new information. So when you mention old information followed by new information, it gives cohesion and coherence to the entire paragraph. And use passive voice judiciously. Sentences in passive voice are in passive voice when the subject in the sentence is the object of the action. While passive voice can be very wordy, active voice is more direct, clear, and concise, and it can also reduce the word counts in the entire manuscript. And most of the scientific journals now encourage authors to use active voice instead of passive voice, but we should also be wary of using excessive first person when writing in active voice. And use transitions to connect the paragraphs. It's very important that the paragraphs in the manuscript are flowing well and they are connected by these transitions. For example, you can have additive transitions, which tells the reader that you're adding or referencing information. And some of the examples are additionally or furthermore. The next type of transition can be adversative transition, which can tell the reader that you're comparing and contrasting, which means that there is a conflict or disagreement between different pieces of information. As an example of this type of transition, however, besides, nonetheless, these are all the different types of adversative transitions. And there are causal transitions which point out to the consequence, and as an example, it can be since or consequently, etc. Always use verbs that convey the strength of your claim These are called reporting verbs, and there are 3 types of reporting verbs. One is neutral, which are used, which the examples of which can be demonstrate, show, describe, etc. So these are used to say when the writer describes the factual terms. And the second type of reporting verb is tentative, which is used to say when the writer suggests or speculates. So examples would be suggest, hypothesize, etc. And the third type is a strong reporting verb, in which the readers are using these verbs to say, to make strong arguments or claims. For example, argue, emphasize. These are the reporting verbs. In a manuscript, the structure matters, not just the IMRAD structure, the introduction, materials and methods, results and discussion. This is not just the structure, but also how much detail is provided in each section and how these details are presented. It's very important for an editor to understand the points that the author is making. We cannot assume that the reader has all the knowledge that the author has on that particular topic, and hence it's very important to write very clearly for the reader's understanding. For example, the title, instead of being very elaborate and very broad, needs to be direct, accurate, and informative. And sometimes the reviewers and editors, they cannot follow certain points the authors are making, and then they say that the paper is unclear, which means that the clarity of the core ideas is lacking. So make sure that the take-home message or the overarching results are presented well. And when the focus of the particular topic or is clearly brought forth in the manuscript. So when when an editor says that this manuscript does not flow well, it means that the ideas are not presented methodically or in a sequential manner to tell a consistent story. So it's good to have sections and subsections to make the readers aware of where you're taking the entire manuscript to. So it's important to justify the significance of the research in the introduction and re-emphasize it in the later sections. And you then build a logical argument. You hypothesize in the introduction, followed by detailed interpretation in the discussion with comparison to previous studies. So when an editor feels that there is no focus in the paper and the paper is just random paragraphs of different things, this is what it means, that it did not justify why your research is important. And that is why it's very pertinent to make this the hypothesis or the problems statement clear in the introduction and then describe it in detail in the discussion. And sometimes the editors, they do not understand your research approach, and then they say that probably this is not enough. The way the methods that the authors have used is not enough to achieve the goals. This means that the rationale of the study or the framework of the design has not been introduced in the introduction section, or it has not been clearly mentioned in the methods. So methods, as everyone knows, needs to be very well written for another researcher to reproduce these in their own work. So it's important for the author to justify the research approach and introduce that in the introduction and methods, and also highlight the limitation of these methods in the discussion section. And sometimes the editors or the reviewers, they do not agree with the conclusions that the authors are trying to make. And hence it's important to build that logical argument to make them understand the significance of your research, and then also in the conclusion section, provide the discussion and conclusion section, provide that interpretation, detailed interpretation. The next tip is to avoid long and repetitive results, because it is very boring to read. It's important to explain the main patterns and direct the reader towards the tables and figures, which are more the display items are can speak for themselves, and using subheadings will help the reader to understand the details and details of the significant findings. And last but not the least, the novelty and the impact of the article. It's important to present the broader perspective and importance of the study in the abstract and introduction, and describe the implications and practical applications in the discussions and conclusions. Most of the papers, when submitted to any journal, one of the sentences that the editors make is lack of novelty. This might be because the author has not emphasized the practical applications or the broader ramifications of the study well in the abstract and in the subsequent introduction and discussions. So make sure that you set the language of your work in the word processing software to English, either depending upon whether it is British English or American English, so that you can adhere to the author guidelines, and then you carry out at least one spell check, and you can ask a colleague in your field to proofread the manuscript, or you can also ask a native or an English speaker to proofread the manuscript. Editors and reviewers are always impressed by a well-presented manuscript, and the abstract makes the most impact on the readers, on the editors, because that's the first thing when the manuscript they open, that's the first thing that they see. So not just that the abstract should be attractive, but then describing everything, the aims, the background, the aims, the main methods, the main results, and the conclusions effectively in the abstract will help the editors to understand the significance of the study, and then they can delve more deeper into the manuscript. So a well-presented manuscript is always very attractive. So other tips include to be consistent with the heading and subheading format, and consistent with scientific terms, and ensuring that the manuscript is free from careless mistakes, and consistency in formatting of the figures and graphics is important, and all the abbreviations should be defined in the first instance, and then they should be used consistently thereafter. So even if the author has described these acronyms in the abstract, they should be separately described again in the main manuscript. So the ABC of good scientific writing is to be accurate, brief, and clear. To be accurate, avoid using vague language, and say exactly what you mean. Don't overinterpret or underinterpret the study. And be brief, be concise, give all the information, but try not to be too wordy, and adhere to the word limits, because if the editors and the they check the word count limitations, and then if the authors don't adhere to it, then it can be unsubmitted and it can be a loss of time. And be clear, use simple words and avoid the jargon, and wherever possible use verbs instead of noun forms, and consistently use the verb tense throughout the paper. We have Wiley editing services, which the authors can use to format their manuscript, to comprehensively edit the manuscript, translate, or there are many other services such as the professional video design and writing services, etc., which can be availed by authors. So I hope I've been able to give you a fair overview of how to present a how to present a manuscript in order to impress the editors. I guess that's it from me. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this really practical and helpful presentation, Radhika. We do have just a few questions, and I would love to get your answers to them. We have a question here from Maria, and she just wants to know more about in Greek, they use the scientific documents, they use mainly the passive voice. So should they in fact avoid that in English?
It is better to avoid excessive use of passive voice in when submitting to English journals. One, as I said, using active voice reduces the word counts, and it is more direct and crisp, and it is more concise. Whereas passive voice can be more wordy, and then by the time the editor or the reader reads the entire sentence, it makes it more complex to read such sentences, and it's more tiring. So it's better to use active voice.
Excellent, thank you for that. Let me just scan through here, a couple of others. We have a question from Liliana. Could you just go back to the IMRAD, the IMRAD, and explain that a little bit more?
I don't know. I don't understand the question here. Do you want me to go through how to write the IMRAD, the introduction, materials, results, and discussion, or
I think just a little more slow down information about what that actually stands for, what that actually is.
Okay, so as I said, the structure of the manuscript, structure of any manuscript is in the IMRAD format. Is the IMRAD format. That is, it starts with introduction. Now, before that, it starts with the abstract and the keywords, but the main text starts with introduction, then the materials and methods, the results, and the discussions and conclusions. So this is the general format of any manuscript, any scientific manuscript. So it is just not this structure that needs to be followed, but then the quantity and the quality of the details presented. How are you presenting the details within these sections? That is more important. So when you see the title has to be accurate and it has to be informative. It should not have very broad focus. In fact, it should describe the aims and the final findings of whatever the study. In fact, it should describe the study succinctly, rather than if somebody is working on say pancreatic cancer, it just shouldn't say role of some protein in pancreatic cancer. So that's really broad, but then you have to break it down as to, okay, in pancreatic cancer, what are you looking at? What is the gene that you're looking at, and what is the outcome that you have had? So making that more direct and accurate and informative helps the reader to understand, not only the reader to understand, but also it helps in kind of the when people search for your article using the keywords, your article has more chances of being pulled up and more visibility. Again, so next, the clarity or the core ideas or the take-home message. So it's important that in the introduction, there is a funnel kind of an approach for the for any manuscript. So the introduction, it starts with the broader broad introduction to the matter that you're discussing, and then you narrow down to what is missing in the in the entire broad sense that you have described on that topic. What are the gaps in literature? And then you come down to the hypothesis. So this clarity should come forth in the introduction. So the core ideas need to be presented in the introduction. And coming to the materials and methods. So the materials and methods, have to be broad enough to describe in detail about whatever you have done, but then also not very repetitive, but you can always, go back and reference your other work, other methods that other people have used. But you should also describe whatever you have done, and then, make it in such a way that it is reproducible by another group or another set of researchers. So it's important to make sure that all of it is described in the materials. So, and the results. What are the results? And all the results that you describe should not be repetitive, like long, it's saying the same things over and over again. That becomes a little bit boring. So it is important to explain the main patterns in the results, and then make the reader reference the figures and tables, so that the reader can actually understand all the values and all the data that is being presented there. So using subheadings will help the using subheadings in the results section will also help the reader to understand each section of the results in a better way. So what I'm trying to describe here is that there should be clarity in the core ideas, or you should know at the end of reading the manuscript, the reader should know what is the take-home message, or what is the core idea, or what are the overarching results that are brought forth in your manuscript. So when you focus on a particular topic, you need to justify the importance of this result. So here I've tried to tell you what are the kinds of things that you can put in your introduction, and then what are the kinds of things that you can put in your discussion. So when you focus on a particular topic, you need to justify the importance of that research in the introduction section. And you should not just leave it there. You should come back and re-emphasize it in the later sections, in your discussion sections. And then when you're doing all these things, you build a logical argument, you go sequentially, you hypothesize in your introduction, and then you get into the discussion with a detailed interpretation. And then again, when you come to the method section, so when editors feel that your research approach or the methods that you have used are not good enough to achieve your goals, to achieve your results, that is where you need to tell them, or tell them the rationale for us taking this study design, or taking this study framework, or why have you used these methods, and rationalizing this in the introduction, and explaining it more in the methods, and highlighting this any limitations. Supposing you have used ABC methods and you have not used XYZ methods, why have you not used those methods? Those are the limitations of your study. That has to be forthcoming in the discussion section. So these are the different types of tips that I have I've tried to tell in this slide. And the last but not the least is the novelty part of it, which every editor would look for, because if every editor or every reader would like to know what is this study telling me a little bit more than what I already know. So that is the thing that you have to bring forth in your conclusion section, both in the abstract as well as in the concluding section of the discussion. What is the importance of the study, and why the study has been conducted, and practically or clinically where is it relevant, or is it relevant in any therapeutics? Is it a preclinical study which can actually be a stepping stone for some other drug discovery? So what applications are there in this study is something that you need to discuss in the conclusion section. So these are the kind of things that I've tried to put in here.
Great, thank you so much for the additional detail. I just want to go back and confirm that the IMRAD means I, introduction, M, method, R, results, and D, discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that is the IMRAD, I-M-R-A-D. And let's see, we do have a few more. We have a few minutes left. As far as the graphs and pictures, is it better to insert them directly in the article or as attachments afterwards?
It depends on the author guidelines, because different journals, they want it in different ways. So there is no one rule that fits all. Some journals want it to be supplied as different in different files. So it's very dependent on the author guidelines. It's best to adhere to author guidelines to avoid unsubmission later.
Excellent. What about the cover letter that's sometimes required? Can you say anything about the cover letter?
Cover letter is some journals require it and some journals don't. Again, you need to look at the author guidelines and determine. So the cover letter has to mainly mention what is the study about, and what is the how is the study important in the field, and why is this journal the best fit for this study. So you look at the aims and scope of the journal and then determine that yes, this is my study has to be submitted to this journal. But then that aspect should be forthcoming in the cover letter, and you have to tell the editor that, look, these are your aims and this is what I have done. So I think this will be very useful for the readership of your journal. So that is something that that the author needs to emphasize in the cover letter.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe just two more. One is a question about the abstract. Would you say the format and all the tips for the abstract are the same as for the articles?
Abstract is basically the summary of the entire study. So it is like the entire study in a small capsule, and that, as I mentioned, it has to be attractive to the editor. So some journals have structured abstract in which the aims, the methods, the results, and the conclusions are written separately. Some have unstructured abstracts in which there is no such differentiation, and some have descriptive abstracts in which the entire study can be summarized in a descriptive way. So the best way, how the journals want, again, you have to go back to the author guidelines and then see how they want it to be written. If it's a structured abstract, if it's a structured abstract, which most of the journals want it that way, it's best to follow the guidelines that I have described, but everything in a concise way. And usually abstracts have a very strict word limit of about 250 words, sometimes 300 words. So it's how you are going to, what are you going to put in the abstract is very important. You cannot dump all your results. So you have to mention only those significant results which really, bring forth the, which are like the star of your entire study. So that is what it requires time and it requires patience to write it. But then, and of course, practice makes perfect. So yes, I would say that it is like a mini manuscript, but then which encapsulates the entire essence of it.
Got it. Very good. And finally, we're just going to take one more because we will be running out of time. I appreciate everyone sharing so many questions and feedback in the question box. We are just going to ask this one. If you do, use a colleague or native a fluid English speaker to proofread the manuscript. On an ethical level, is it necessary to put them in the list of authors?
No, because authorship is based on the ICMJ guidelines, or you can go back and see that. An authorship criteria, this is a whole different, it does not really come under this, the topic of discussion of this webinar, but anyway, I'm going to answer it. An author should have had, should have contributed widely to the study, to the framework, to designing of the study, to the conducting of the study, and to interpret or data analysis of the study, and extensively should have written and drafted the manuscript. So there are there are different criteria in for which an authorship is based on. It's based on ICMJ guidelines, and then you can also go to the credit taxonomy and look there. So if they've only edited the manuscript for grammar, or if they've proofread it, then this person will not be called as an author. They should not be included in the in the author set, in the list of authors. Sorry.
Right. Thank you for going into that part. So we are going to wrap it up now. There are some questions about the handouts and the recording. So I just want to remind you that you will receive an email, and the email will have a link to the recording. And for those participating in this live webinar, you will also receive a certificate of attendance. So in about 24 hours, look for that email. You could check your spam folder if you don't see it in 24 hours, but you will receive a link to the recording and a certificate for those participating live. The handouts are located in the handouts panel of the GoToWebinar pane. So if you click on the handouts, you will see a PDF of these slides, and you can download that now and keep that for your reference. So that about wraps it up for today. I want to thank you for giving us your time and your expertise, Radhika. It was very, very informative and detailed, and I know that a lot of practical information will be useful for everyone today. So thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of the day or night, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us from all over, and we'll see you the next time at another webinar. Thank you.
So if you do have any questions, please write to us, and I will make make utmost effort to answer all your questions, even if it is not related to the language tips or anything like that. If there are any other questions that you'd like to ask about peer review, or anything to do with authorship criteria, or how to structure your manuscript, or how to write different sections, do write to me and at rns@wiley.com, and I'll make all my efforts to answer you personally. Thank you so much.
That's very, very generous. Thank you, Radhika. Okay, so we'll see you next time. Everybody have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.